slideshow and workshop available.
Hello, welcome to the third Sunday Forum. I'm so happy you're here. My name is Carrie Ostby. Please let me know if you have any questions. We thank you and welcome anyone joining us at home today or watching us later. I'll be monitoring the chat if there are questions in the chat. Just one bit of housekeeping. If you brought coffee down with you and by the end of the forum today, you're just finished with coffee, feel free to leave the mug on the cart in the back, and then it can just go right into the kitchen. If you're not finished and want more coffee, feel free to bring your mug back upstairs for more coffee. But I'm so pleased today to welcome Nicole Nicole Hara to Christ United Methodist Church today, a member. I was interested, we got to hear a little of the story during the service today, and I'm so pleased she's here to tell us more about Griot and answer questions. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. This feels very formal, but I had a PowerPoint presentation today because I like visuals, and so I wanted to, in lieu of you all being in the actual space, maybe with the visuals, kind of help you get a sense of what it feels like and what it looks like as I'm talking about Griot Arts as sort of a organization, and then also as a physical space that I have been able to create here in my community. So again, my name is Nicole Hara, and I'm the founder and owner and currently the sole employee of Griot Arts without any pay. It's great. It's a labor of love. And Griot Arts is a community arts hub in Rochester that celebrates art, literature, and cultural expression, centering Black people. And I think maybe because I'm a Black person, I have a very vast understanding of sort of like what Blackness and what the African diaspora is. I think sometimes, even within the Black community, we tend to, I don't know if that's just a product of kind of the stories that we inherit about who we are. We sometimes even have a very narrow sense of what being Black is. And so when I say Black, I'm actually talking about everyone of African descent from across the globe. And so that includes people here in the United States that are African-American, meaning that the descendants of enslaved Africans, free men and women, Maroons, as well as African immigrants from places like the Caribbean, Latin America, Africa, refugees and immigrants from all of those different places, and people that have, you know, you're a Black person in Italy and you end up in the United States, you know, there's sort of that kind of trajectory as well. I'm a student of migration studies and Black studies sort of as an academic, but also I have a really, my background as a person of color, as a Black person, kind of spans a lot of different identities. And even within my own family, I have African family members, Caribbean family members, African American family members. And so when I say Black, I'm really trying to hold all of that. So I just want to say that, because sometimes I think we can gloss over and be like, yes, I have a space that's centering, you know, Black art and literature, and not pause to kind of think about how vast that identity is and how many communities that actually this is and experiences. So there's a lot of stories and a lot of histories that.
Nicole,
Yes.
put the link up just a little.
Yeah. Is that better? No, now it's off.
That was worse. Let's see if we can.
Hello?
There you go.
I think I have to kiss it. Okay. So I founded Griot Arts about a year ago, and it's really the culmination of a decade of dreaming and thinking about what it means to be an artist, a writer, a woman of color in this community, and seldom seeing myself reflected in the arts and cultural life of the community. As much as I love it and as much as I have been involved in it, not being able to sort of see myself as a person of color reflected in some of these spaces locally. And also holding a little bit of grief around the people that have left this community. A lot of community members of color, artists of color that I built community with who end up leaving because they couldn't find spaces for themselves to thrive and to survive. And so there is a little bit of that I'm doing as well, and holding kind of these people that have left that we could have built things together that could have sustained. And it's for those of you that saw the Black History exhibit that was up here that I helped curate with Barbershop Talk and Social Services, and the History Center, that exhibit, some of the themes around that exhibit actually have to do with how much transition happens here with, specifically with the Black community, but with, I think, a lot of other communities of color as well, where we're not able to build things, institutions and communities over time, because subsequent generations don't stay here for a number of different reasons that have to do with not feeling a sense of belonging. And so this isn't going to keep anybody here, but it's sort of my seed and an invitation to say, maybe we can start to build an ecosystem here that is able to sort of think about belonging in a lot of different ways. I think sometimes, especially when you have a small community, of people of color that are facing very real issues that have to do with like housing and food and what's happening in the schools. Me peddling art and books isn't quite the antidote, and it's not a panacea at all, but I have found that the arts is something that's very healing, and joy and practices of joy are really important to practices of liberation for all of us, and particularly for those of us who have never felt a sense of belonging in space, or haven't been able to say, I'm beloved in some way, right? You get to be in a space where perhaps you don't have to think about some of these other issues for a minute. You can come in and be held in a space that celebrates who you are at different levels. I'm rambling now because I got off script because I got nervous. So I will just continue here. So all of you know this, our Rochester community is growing, it's dynamic and diverse. And there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that our most marginalized voices are centered and thought of in different ways. And I include that in arts and cultural life in our community. That's something I'm actually really passionate about. And that doesn't always have to be about, it doesn't always have to be about the struggle in a way. It can be about what it looks like to just live and be, because for so long, that's the ways that communities have survived and have been able to build resilience, is through sort of these practices of being able to just be in community with one another and to celebrate. And according to the 2020 census in Rochester, our Black community members represent the largest racial and ethnic minority in the community, but we don't have any actual physical spaces in the community that center our arts and cultural life. And so that's really some of the things that inspired me to start Griot Arts. I was also in A Raisin in the Sun last year, that production at the Rochester Repertory Theater. And it was the first time in my 10 years here that I got to see Black people every single day. Let's just think about that for a minute. I'm the only Black person that my children see every day in this community. And I was able to sit in a theater with 10 other Black creatives and create this beautiful production offering to the community. And it was really powerful. And backstage, we were talking about, well, what would it look like to create more arts experiences like this? What would it look like to have more spaces like this where we get to be together as Black creatives and do things? And so the product of all of that is what you see here, which is the inside, the interior of Griot Arts, which is currently serving as a bookstore, an art gallery, and a community space. And so it's doing a lot because, as I just spent the last 10 minutes telling you, I've been thinking a lot about just all of these things that I'm trying to hold. And it's not perfect. It's, in a lot of ways, it's sort of a prototype of what something like this could look like. You know, what would it take to sustain something like this? And this was sort of my vision of what that would be like. And I'm still sort of in the process of calling in community members to help me continue to dream up more things for that space and other things that might have even escaped my own vision of what this could be. And this is ultimately sort of my mission statement, but it is a curated space to find connection, belonging, and joy through art, literature, and empowering community programming. And already, I opened in July. It's kind of been astounding. I've been very busy. I'm mostly sleepy all the time. But these pictures here are just from July, and they're just images of people being in the space. The image over here is of Nova, my daughter, reading. And then the top image there is a little strip of the art in the gallery right now by a local artist, Jawad Ori. He's been living here for about 10 years and has never had his work showcased anywhere in the community. It's really beautiful and centers Black history and mythology. He's incredibly talented, and it was such a privilege to be able to open up this space with his work in it. The bottom image here is of our first opening, or sorry, the opening of his exhibition, and him being able to talk a little bit about his work with the community. And then the image on the far right to you all is of a workshop that we had where we kind of talked about what it means to be rooted and planted and grounded, and then we also planted plants. It was very little, but it was a really lovely kind of community building moment with I think those were primarily Black women in the space that night. These are some other images too. Those are, of course, my children. That was the very first day we got the keys, and I put up a little sign in the summer right before we started putting up shelves and painting, and it was really beautiful to see their excitement about it. And I think very affirming, as I said, you know, they don't get to see this part of their culture reflected around them all the time, and I have to be very I say militant. I have to be very vigilant in our own home about centering it and making sure that it's something that is, you know, in their lives. And so now that I get to have a space in the community that also reflects that, has been really gratifying as well. So I spoke a little bit about this in the witness video this morning, but the name Griot, how many of you have heard of that term before? Yeah, it's a difficult word to say. It comes from the French word for primarily West African storytellers and musicians that have been part of the African tradition throughout the continent, not just West Africa, for generations and generations. And griots were really storytellers and musicians. Often they told stories through music, so they would use drums and song, but they were responsible for keeping the cultural traditions of their communities alive. And often the way that they did that was by remembering the histories and being able to recall things like individual family histories and lineages of anybody in the community, as well as sort of collective histories about what had happened to the community and the people. And because they were so knowledgeable, because they were able to remember for the community and teach the community, they were also very important in terms of being counselors to the leaders. And so they were artists who were sort of second in command in a way in these communities because of this ability that they had. And the tradition continues to stay alive in these original sort of parts of West Africa, Senegal, Mali, Benin, Cameroon, Nigeria. But they also traveled through the trauma of enslavement through the Atlantic. And so the griot tradition, and you may hear the griot word used when also referring to a lot of African American and Caribbean artistic and visual kind of performance and production, because that core of sustaining community, of remembering history, of supporting a people through the arts, is something that's still kind of part of the lineage here in the diaspora. So I was very intentional about naming it this name. I went to the business incubator and they told me I should change it because it was so difficult and no one was going to be able to understand it and say it. And I said, no, it's not negotiable for me. I can't name it anything else because it's really, I don't know if there were griots in my tradition, you know, in my lineage, but I certainly feel like one in a lot of ways as an artist and then as someone who's creating a space like this. And also just like I'm very nerdy about like local Black history. I've always been that way here too. And I feel like I'm always sort of working in that kind of griot tradition of collective memory and history and trying to just keep that alive for future generations. And so it felt like something that was very much at the core of what I was trying to create. And so I have a quote here by Ben Obrey, and I mentioned this a little bit in the witness as well. Griots were almost like prophets in a way because, and I know we get a little weirded out by prophets, but they were prophets because they sort of knew, because they knew where people were going, where they had been, they knew where the people were going. So they sort of had this, they were able to hold the history, and because they knew and they had such a deep understanding of that, they were all able to hold a vision for the future, as well as warnings about what might happen, you know, to the community, you know, if they may follow a certain path because they saw the patterns. But they also were about sort of holding the light in the darkness. And so and for those of you, forgive me for repeating myself from this morning, but because a lot of the storytelling happened around the fire, I also love this idea that these griots were also able to lead communities through darkness. And so whether it was around that literal place of the fire or in moments of crisis, there were people that the community turned to, sometimes even more so than the leaders, because they had this knowledge and because they could do it through things like song and art and dance and other things like that. So our physical space, when you go in, and I know a couple of you have been in there already, it's very cozy, it's small, but there's a bookstore, an art gallery, a community space, as I've mentioned. And then I really wanted it to be flexible enough for it to transform with what needed to happen in there. And so you saw some of the photos, and we've had workshops in there and talks and things like that. A Somali American author just came on Friday and talked about how she wanted to have a Somali women's drumming circle in there with a tea service. And, you know, I was like, yes, of course. And, you know, the furniture is very light and can be moved to the side. A couple of weeks ago, I had the privilege of hosting a local author from a ethnic group in Ethiopia, and 50 of his family members and community members came to the space. He's the first of his community to have written a book about the genocide that occurred to them in Ethiopia in the early 2000s, which is why they're here. And many of them live here in Rochester and Austin, Minnesota, the largest group in the United States. And it was really powerful to sort of see our space transform to kind of hold this particular community. And so I'd really love to sort of watch it kind of expand and contract depending on what community might need. One of my other favorite things about the space is there's a little kids room in the back, which was the first place I finished because the kids were home all summer, and Seth and I were painting walls and putting up shelves, and so they stayed in the back there. But it's sort of wall-to-wall books and little art things that they could do. But my favorite thing is watching kids run back there, and usually I'm in the front by the register, and then I just hear like a wow. It's like my favorite thing to also be able to have that space for children too. As the mother of two small children who, you know, cannot go quietly into a bookstore and chill out. It's really nice that I get to have that in the space as well. Another thing that you might notice when you go in is it is very colorful. Obviously, I'm a colorful person. But it was a very intentional kind of aesthetic choice. I did do all of the decor and the interior design in here. I don't know if it's design, but it's something is going on in there. I did all of that. But it's modeled off after this idea of your auntie's living room. And Bell Hooks, the late scholar Bell Hooks, talked about this idea of galleries, the first galleries and museum spaces and art spaces in Black communities were actually in Black homes here in the United States at a time where Black art wasn't being shown in museums and galleries that were open to the community and the public. And so aunties and grandmas, it was kind of a gendered thing. She said it was a lot of, you know, women who were sort of curating things in their homes, you know, whether it was family photos or objects and things of that nature. And so I had been working on an article up in the cities as an arts writer. I think it was the largest collection of Black photography over the last 100 years. It was up at the U last year, and I was writing an essay for it. And I came across this really beautiful essay by Bell Hooks that kind of talked about, evoked this idea of like these domestic spaces and Black homes being the first art galleries. And so that's what I wanted. And there's a lot of things that kind of allude to that. There's a lot of wicker and rattan that kind of remind you of like, you know, sitting on a porch and like being, you know, in homes. A lot of the colors are reminiscent of the Caribbean and colorful Southern homes in the United States. I'm Cameroonian as well. And so there's a lot of things that are from the African continent, whether that's like baskets of weaving or fabrics and textiles, and all of those things were chosen intentionally to kind of just visually kind of represent some of these spaces and kind of cultural touch points. And again, it's so beautiful because people come in. I mentioned the Somali American author, Dasra Noor. She came 2 nights ago with her family, and I don't have anything in there that like necessarily represents Somalia, but she was like, oh my gosh, these baskets, like we have this, or I have an antique comb, an Afro pick. And she was like, oh, we used those when we were kids to comb out our hair. And then I had a poetry night a few weeks ago, and these 3 young Black poets came up and they were like, oh man, like I remember, this definitely feels like my auntie's living room. Like I remember her having, you know, this wicker thing in her porch. And so it's working, I guess. My vision for it. And there's a reference to it as well that I love, where people get to come in and they're sort of like, it feels like home, but because it's your auntie's living room, you also respect it. And so it's like it's like a great thing in that sense. I've also brought in a lot of artifacts and vintage objects that celebrate Black and African American culture and diasporic culture. And so you'll see that there. There's a drum, like I mentioned, there's the baskets, there's some antique items. I have a couple of, this is also one of my favorite memories. Miss Joyce Gibbs came in with Leilani Gibbs, her daughter, a few weeks ago, and I handed Joyce 5 copies of Jet magazine. Do you all know Jet magazine? Yeah, and I have been collecting them over the years, and you know, she had come in, she was kind of tired, she kind of sat down, when Ronnie and I were talking, but she like woke up. She was so excited about these magazines. And they were all, the ones I have are pretty old, they're from late 1950s, early 1960s, and she's like, how do you have these? And I was like, I've been collecting them, and she was just flipping through them, and then she's like, I need to go and see if I have any more of these. If I do, I'll come and send them to you. And so, yeah, it was just things like that that just kind of make me, again, feel like there's these moments of connection and these physical things that people can kind of connect with in the space outside of just the books and the art. I've really thought a lot about what is gonna make people feel, I don't know, like seen, I think is really what it is. And having to do some of that work. And, you know, Jenny talked upstairs about belonging. Belonging is really hard work because you have to think about what's going to be welcoming to people. And I said that I'm trying to curate the space of belonging, but it wasn't until she said that I was like, yeah, it is actually going to work. Like, you know, having to do that. And for me, it's also iterative. So learning from the people that are coming in and being like, you know, what else could this space do or have that could help people feel seen and welcomed in different ways. So one big part of our space is the books, which I hadn't intended it to be this whole big like bookstore, but it turned into this whole bookstore, mostly because I love books, and I realized that I was going to a lot of events before we opened up the space with books that I was just like sharing with people. And then I sat down and was like, well, I feel like it would be really interesting to actually have a space where people could come and find representative and empowering books. Again, as a mom of 2 small children, it was actually really difficult for me to find any place locally where I could go, you know, outside of like Barnes and Noble, to find, you know, books that I was interested in that could, you know, reflect my family, but then also, just, I don't know, just different things that I was interested in. And I was like, well, you know, I think it'd be really interesting to try that out. And it's been probably the most successful part of this whole endeavor has been this bookstore. And it's been really beautiful and powerful because everyone has come into this bookstore and everyone is resonating with what is on the shelves. And I realized that I had a secret talent as a bookseller because I did not know that I knew so much about books until I started to actually open up this bookstore and people started asking me for recommendations for books. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I know what to tell you. And I feel like I have a recommendation and I know a lot about, you know, these things. And it's also been really beautiful because a lot of schools are now starting to come to this space and ask for books for their libraries and media centers. And that was an unexpected thing that I didn't realize would be part of this endeavor. So there is, it's multi-generational, there's all different types of genres, and as I said, there's a children's area in the back, and then there's fiction, nonfiction, poetry. I'm trying to get more local authors in there as well, so that there's a selection for folks that are looking for local authors, and then we're able to also sell the books online, and have audiobooks as well that can support the work that we're doing. And I say we, it's me, but I say we, I leave it open because the invitation is that in a few years, there'll be more of me to be able to have a we. And then, as I mentioned, this is our gallery. It's just one wall right now. The work is supposed to sort of live in the space and you're supposed to, it's not like a white wall museum kind of space. It's meant to be able to kind of like in your home, just live with the work. And right now we have the work by Jabulani Ori. In a few weeks, we'll have another artist come in. And with each artist I work with them to do, you know, artist talks with the community and then other events that might be helpful for their own practice or for them to share their work with the community. So, this is one of my favorite photos of the artist Jabulani with another local artist, Tierney Parker, and then Jackie Trotter, who came by with a bunch of, I don't know if you know Jackie Trotter, one of the sort of founding, I think she was one of the founding members of, our local NAACP, and just a wonderful Black elder in our community. And then these are just some of the programs and events, that we have had and that we will continue to do. And I will continue to expand it as people, want to see different things in the space. These are some of the events that have happened as well, since July, and more things have happened. I need to clone myself because, there's a lot of events that we try to do each week, each month. And I'm hoping that we can get more volunteers and folks to kind of help us out with that. And then if you haven't visited us already, we are 115 North Broadway Avenue. So right next to the castle, there's that building. There's a massage parlor and the Somali cafe, then there's me and an African decorator. So it's about 4 businesses in a little strip there. I'm the one kind of in the middle. And right now our hours are, my hours are depending on me. And so I put them out, I put them on Facebook and Instagram. They're kind of weekly. It's kind of like your local taco truck, your favorite taco truck. Follow us. We'll be open when we're open. But usually we're open Wednesday through Saturday. So that is all. Thank you. So we have some time for questions. So if you have any questions.
What was that hush hour?
Yeah, that is our monthly book swap and silent book club. So anyone can come. I have books out there. People can bring books to swap, and you can bring your own book to read for an hour. It's quite popular. There's a few other places in town. I think we'll see bars and cafes that do kind of a silent reading hour. There's a trend toward that now, to unplug and read in silence for an hour.
Nice.
I may have missed this out or what, like, you happen to have books that are biracial, but kind of supportive of the black side. They're kind of pushed to the white, but you can support the.
For sure, you know what I mean? That's a fantastic question. So the question was if I have any books by biracial authors that are about also supporting sort of their Black identity.
Yeah.
I do, it's a really big passion of mine, is to kind of support and center multiracial narratives. So I know I have one specifically that's called Raising Multiracial Kids, that I just got in, and then I have a couple of memoirs as well, kind of around that experience. So if we want to stop by, we should look at some things in that space.
Yeah,
Or did you have a certain author in mind, or?
I don't know, but yeah, I definitely entered their ages from 4 to 16.
Oh, the children, yes, I definitely have children's books about that. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Great.
So do you have a day job?
Oh, yes, Marlon, I have 20 day jobs. I do have a day job. I do the PBS show that most of you know. I host and produce our town show about Rochester. And then I do the Mayo Clinic Press Rise for Equity podcast. I'm the host of that. And then I teach at the medical school, and I write for different publications. So yeah, I do a lot of.
Oh. And the store's open when?
Well, that's a problem we need to.
What do you teach your ma'am?
Actually, it's a really exciting course I was able to develop toward, my last year. I left my job as program director of, diversity at the medical school a couple of years ago. And then last year I was there, I was able to develop a class, that centers art and literature to talk about health justice. And so I work with, medical students at all years, and we teach a 8-week course that uses art and literature to talk about their own identities and their own humanity, and also how kind of understanding who we are and where we come from can help us work toward better health outcomes and justice and health.
So you mentioned
that you were the only employer? Are you saying you're hiring or looking for more volunteers?
Yes, if you would like to volunteer, I'm,
My hours are full. I was just wondering in case in the future.
yeah, well, in the future for sure. I currently don't have the capacity to hire anyone, even myself. But I am looking for, probably some volunteers, especially around events and things. So, right.
What kind of, well, there's so many different religious experiences in Africa. And how are they being received here? And also Islam, are some of the Islamic folks writings also including and participating?
That's a fantastic question. The question was, how other faiths within the African diaspora are being reflected in this space. Again, this is almost a perfect job for me because I'm always thinking about these things. I've been really intentional about making sure that certain authors, and that I have access to books that are written by small American authors that are Muslim. There's quite a few of them in there. I even have a book called Kosher Soul, which is about a Jewish soul food African American shelf on Michael Tweedy. Books about it's called Being Black, Zen and Black Mindfulness, and she's a monk. She's an African American monk, and so I've actually done a lot of research to try to make sure that different faiths and aspects of culture are reflected in our children's book section as well. I've worked to also have some representative books in that space, and also that are sort of interfaith, and Diwali is coming up. So the books are actually not just about Black authors, they're actually about BIPOC authors. And so the majority of them are by Black authors. That's how I started off. But then I just wanted to make more room. And so you'll see that there's actually, especially in the children's books area, I have children's books by Indigenous authors, South Asian authors, Latinx authors. I have a selection of bilingual Spanish English books. And then I'm actually, a lot of the African communities are really excited and have been dropping off books in Somali and Amharic, Anua, and then I feel like there's one more that I'm missing here, but yeah, Arabic as well.
I was wondering if from the public schools or by any schools, the ELL programs, do they have they connected with you, and are they?
Yeah, that's a perfect question. The schools and specifically the ELL programs have connected. Yes, a couple of them have connected, and are hoping that they can, either source books or get curated lists from me about books that they might have in their media centers and libraries and classrooms.
I asked that because I was substitute teaching quite a bit, and the students were always very receptive when I had books from, with African authors or characters or.
For sure, because they get to feel.
Well, yeah, it makes sense. Right.
Anything else?
I've got another question, I'm sorry. There was I don't know, if it was a culture that you referred to in the service today. It starts with an H. What was that for this? Sorry. my memory-
I might have mentioned Senegal today. I was talking about the Griot tradition,
Which tradition?
the Griot tradition.
Yes.
Yes.
Griot.
Oh, Griot, yes, and I spoke a little bit about that. Yes, they're just, they are storytellers, in the African tradition, so they're across the African
Okay.
diaspora.
I was wondering because I was thinking that it had something to do with in Louisiana. Is that where?
Yeah, the Griot tradition actually, so there's traces of it in a lot of like southern US Black culture, and so Louisiana is one of those places as well. That's the Griot tradition, and the word itself is French, and so Congo Square in New Orleans, I think, that particular space was a space where enslaved Africans would go on Sundays, where they were allowed to go and dance and sing and have, kind of their own, traditional, religious things, but griots were a part of that because they were often the ones who were drumming and singing some of the ancestral songs.
Yeah, I do remember hearing that that is kind of very French down there too.
Yeah.
That's what, okay, sorry.
No, I'm really not about that. Thank you. We're getting to time. Is there any final question?
I have one question. What's the best way we can, the community can support real artists?
Thank you. Well, you can come. And, I love the bookstore. I think, just come and explore, and support in that way. I tell people about us. I feel like I still need, it's like, I have to keep the vision alive, but also keep the lights on. So I need to make sure that people know that it's open and we're here. And so let people know, and it is open to everyone as much as it's about centering, Black art and culture. I believe that when we do that, when we center the most marginalized voices, we actually make room for everyone. And so, that I want to make sure is very clear to everyone.
Did you say
I
that the
want-
date?
On the book of belonging, so no. That was a book that was read, right?
Yes.
Okay, are they ordering a bunch of them here at church or not? Or
I
should
think-
we order through you or what?
I think they are, and I donated one or two, and I think, I am not sure if I'm going to stock it just because I would have to think about stocking other like religious books because it is technically a Bible. But you can, if you want to buy it online, on bookshop.org, through us, then you can do that. But I probably won't have it in the store, but you should ask probably
Yeah,
the
okay.
church. if
What
they're
the
gonna
check,
order.
please.
Sorry, I can't recall. Did you say that the days that you would be open would be like 8 to 5, or did you say into the evening as well?
They vary, and so, I'm usually open 10 to 4, and then I'm open for like evening events. And so right now, the way I'm getting that out is on the website and on, our Instagram and Facebook.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.